Alright, let's practice some taxiing. First of all, let's review some of the most important items. You're controlling the airplane on the ground with your feet, so with the rudder pedals. They're not only connected to the rudder, but also to the nose wheel steering. There are a few airplanes that don't have nose wheel steering. In this case, you would have to steer the airplane with the brakes, so with differential braking. The brakes are on top of the rudder pedals, and you operate them with the tips of your feet. Brakes can also be used to make a turn really tight, so you would use the steering and differential braking then. It's very important during, first of all, while we are talking about the rudder pedals, one common mistake new pilots make, which is very understandable because you probably have been driving cars for years, is to try to steer the airplane during taxiing with the yoke, but this is not going to have any effect. It's very important during taxi to always keep your eyes outside, because some airports, ramps are very busy. There are people, vehicles, other airplanes, so you really have to watch out, even if it's a controlled airport, because you never know. Now when you start to taxi, you release your brakes, and then, depending on a few factors like airplane weight, the slope of the apron or the parking position, and the engine idle power setting, the airplane may start to move on its own, or you need just a small burst of power. The first thing you should do after you started to move is to test your brakes. So first push the left brake, then the right brake briefly, and see if they both work. If any of those doesn't work, stop and have the airplane checked. If both brakes should not work, then of course you'll have a major problem, but then again, probably the parking brake shouldn't have worked in the first place. But we'll have a look at this abnormal procedure, brakes failure, a little bit later on. Okay, so let's just start to taxi, and I'll explain a few more items on the go. Okay, the taxi light is already switched on. Good. So let's just release the parking brake and have a good look around. The area is clear, that's good. We start moving even with idle power. Okay, that's fine. And now I just briefly tap my left brake and then my right brake to see if they work. They do. Here we have to turn to the left, so we push the left rudder pedal just as much as we need to always stay on the yellow center line. On a controlled airport, of course, you also need taxi clearance by the tower. Always keep your eyes outside. Another common mistake is to ride the brakes, so to have a little bit of power set, but also braking to control the airplane speed. If you need to slow down, first of all reduce the power to idle, and then if you need to slow down further, then use your brakes as well, but don't ride the brakes all the time. If you're going around a corner, don't be too fast. If you approach a taxiway crossing, always have a look left and right for traffic. Now if it's a busy ramp, walking pace is fast enough. Of course, if it's not busy, if there's enough space, you can go a bit faster, especially on a taxiway like this that is very long, straight and wide. There is a taxiway location sign coming up to our left, so let's have a brief stop. to talk about the most important signs. So I'll turn left here on purpose and stop for a moment. Here you can see that we're on Taxiway Lima, because you have a yellow L in a black square. There's a saying that goes, black square, you're there. So this means you are on Taxiway Lima. The yellow sign to the left showing a C means that Taxiway Charlie is a left turn from Lima here to the left, and then you're on Charlie. Exit 2, for example, is on your right. So you should know those signs from ground school. Just make sure you know all of them before you actually taxi around an airport. You can actually look at some other important signs, because they're just over there. Alright, here you can see a runway holding point. So if you turn to the left here, you would be on Taxiway Charlie, and you have the holding point of runway 3315 in front of you, with the holding point line. On a controlled airport, never ever cross this line without clearance from tower. On an uncontrolled field, never ever enter a runway without looking left, right, down the runway into the approach sector, making sure no one's approaching or taking off or landing. Another thing you should do when you start, or sometime during taxi, is when you are actually doing a turn, watch your flight instruments, turn indicator, gyro, check if they're moving in the correct direction. And also the artificial horizon shouldn't move. So in a turn, the turn coordinator, the airplane symbol, will bank in the direction of the turn, and the ball in the turn coordinator will move to the outside of the turn. Now, as I've said before, if you need to make a really tight turn, you can use your brakes as well. So if steering is not sufficient, can use your brakes. So let's say we're on this taxi lane here, and I'd like to turn around in a really tight space. I'll slow down, and then I'm not only pushing my nose to the left now, but I'm also using the left toe brake. For this you will probably need power, because you're braking at the same time. Might need a lot of power, but then you can really have a very small turn radius. Okay, then we have a look at two of the most important abnormal situations during taxi, or that are directly related to taxi, and this is steering failure or brakes failure. Now, if you have a steering failure, you can, as I just showed you, just use your brakes to maneuver the aircraft. And if that doesn't work too good, just stop and have the airplane towed back to the parking position. Now, if you have a brake failure, that can of course be also a really hazardous situation. If you notice your brakes don't work anymore, well, of course, first of all, reduce the power to idle. And then, if that doesn't help enough, then also switch off the engine by pulling the mixture or switching off the ignition. Because even with idle thrust or power, the engine produces a little bit of forward thrust, and you don't want it, you want to stop. And if that's not sufficient as well, just, if you're on a paved taxiway, just go into the grass, because there will have a lot of drag and the airplane will slow down more easily. And if it's inevitable that you will hit an obstacle, well, just aim for the softest of them and try to be as slow as possible on impact. So let's demonstrate this. Let's say I'm taxiing with quite a high speed along this wide taxiway. And then I try to brake, but I notice my brakes don't work anymore. So first of all, reduce power to idle. Then, if required, switch off the engine and go into the grass. Because you'll probably stop pretty quick there. All right, so let's just quickly start the engine again. And then we can talk about, while we're on the grass, talk about taxiing on loose surfaces. Now, first of all, if you taxi on the grass or any loose surface, you should taxi with the flaps up, because otherwise debris, stones, dirt can be thrown onto the flaps, even small stones, and it can damage them. This is not as much of a factor in a high wing airplane such as this, but it's a real factor on a low wing airplane. Furthermore, during taxi, of course, you will probably need more power than on a paved surface, and also pull on the yoke or the stick, whatever you have, because this will put less pressure on the nose wheel. Otherwise, the nose wheel takes a lot of wear. So, if you're going on the grass, just pull back on the yoke to make it easier for the nose wheel. Also, it's less likely than if you hit any bump, any dent in the ground, that the nose wheel will be damaged. Then, of course, you'll probably need quite a lot of power depending on the actual surface condition. Don't stop unless you really have to, because after you have stopped, you will really need a lot of power to get going again. So really plan in advance so that you don't have any unnecessary stops during your taxi on the grass. Alright, then just one last thing, and that is taxiing with wind. Now, I've said before that the taxiing is done with the rudder pedals only, but that's not entirely true, because you do use your yoke for wind correction. Now, if you have a strong wind, you should also be aware of that during taxi. And what you should do is, if you have a headwind from left or right, just turn the yoke into this direction. So if you have a headwind from the left, quartering headwind from the left, so just put your ailerons into the wind, because now the left aileron will be up, and this will help keeping the left wing on the ground. Otherwise, the wind may blow in below the wing and lift it. We don't want that. The same with the wind from the right. You can also pull a bit back so that the tail will be pushed down as well, because the elevator will be deflected upwards now. And for a tailwind, it's just exactly the opposite. So if you have a tailwind from the right, so from right behind, then turn the yoke to the left. And if the wind is from left behind, turn the yoke to the right. This will keep the wings on the ground and also push the yoke a little bit forward with the tailwind. One way to remember that is climb into the wind and dive away from the wind. And if you really have a strong crosswind, it's really important, because many people neglect this, but if you have a strong wind on the ground, even during taxi, you should also use your yoke to compensate for that. Alright, now this concludes the lesson about taxiing, and next time we'll actually go flying. See you then.